It's great to be back with you on Amon Great Radio Communications. It's another informative episode of Sports and the Geopolitical Economy. I'm your host, Abiodun Abari, and thank you for joining me. Today, I crave your indulgence to celebrate Simone Biles, U.S. gymnast. Recall I spoke about her last quarter when we were delving into mental strength or toughness as a lesson business leaders can imbibe from sports stories. Yes, she withdrew from the individual all-round gymnastic competition of the 2020 Olympics that was held in 2021. Yeah, due to mental struggles. Yes, and I acknowledged her mental fortitude for taking such a decision, and I also acknowledged our mental fortitude for bouncing back in October 2023 at the World Artistic Gymnastic Championships by picking up 4 gold medals to become the most decorated gymnast of all time. And today I'm acknowledging our mental fortitude for returning to the Olympics this year, this summer, winning 3 gold medals and silver medal, now having a total of 11 Olympic medals, of which 7 are gold, okay, and now having 30 world championships and still remaining the most decorated gymnast of all time. Alright, and remarkably, she performed the most complex vault in women's gymnastics, which is called by her own name, okay, Biles, alright, and just like when you wear what you have in football, the Cruyff turn by legendary Johan Cruyff, late Dutch footballer, alright, he was also coach of Barcelona, and she won the gold medal in the vault final last Saturday. Simone Biles actually won the gold medal in the vault final last Saturday, and remarkably, like I said, she performed that complex vault again. And bear in mind that she almost walked away from gymnastics 3 years ago. I think this is truly remarkable. And of course, the Nigerian female basketball team being the first African basketball team, male or female, to reach the quarterfinals of the Olympics basketball event, and being led by a female coach, Rena Wakama. I mean, it's kudos, inspiring stuff. Yes, elite athletes have been able to engender a cult-like following with consistent legendary performances that continue to endear them to their fan base, which are brands target by engaging in sponsorship of business events, sponsorship of teams, sponsorship of individuals, investment in image rights of elite athletes, and of course merchandise rights too of teams. Okay, so brands also mop up prime advert slots from broadcast and media rights owners. All right, so all these we have dealt with extensively with in the last quarter. You can do well to listen or re-listen to the recordings of last quarter to strengthen the foundation for understanding what we are dealing with this time around. So it is quite important that messages or campaigns targeting sports audience can mirror the extraordinary qualities exuded by these athletes and sports persons and their teams. These are the qualities that endear them to the audience, and that audience might as well find any brand that mirrors such qualities relatable, when they see those qualities or those characteristics that they really like, that those qualities that endear them to their favorite athletes. When they find those qualities being reflected by any brand, I think they can easily relate, and they can easily become loyal customers to such brands. So Also, it's important that advertising messages and campaigns are optimized by taking that into consideration, and in addition, the values epitomized by individuals or teams or their countries should also be proactively considered when seeking to profit from sports consumers. Like Cristiano Ronaldo will not promote sugar-based drinks because of the premium he places on good health and its promotion. Now, I would like to refresh our minds with a recap of what I discussed with you last episode. As I emphasized how businesses need to be proactive when it comes to actions taken in the sports economy, as the influence of the geopolitical economy is a reality. Okay, I specifically mentioned the controversial parody of the Leonardo da Vinci's depiction of the Last Supper by drag queens and transgenders as they are the opening ceremony of the ongoing Summer Olympics in Paris, and as the French government's pandering to the far left, who helped Monsieur Macron's coalition achieve majority during the second round of voting at the French national elections recently. Then I explained the metamorphosis of sports from just a mere pursuit, a mere socio-cultural pursuit, of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, as dictated by European utilitarianism, to its commercialization today, as reflective of the dominance of the United States free market approach to the global economy. The shift from protecting and advancing the interests of the native people and their societies to protecting and promoting the interests of state entities and the global business and political elite. And of course, that shift of the majority of the revenue occurring from ticket sales of games to the sports industry of media and broadcast rights now, corporate sponsorships, merchandise sales, and other commercial collaborations. And of course, I spoke about how the global south is coming into its own, when it comes to the hosting of sports business events, putting an end to the exclusivity enjoyed by the North Americans and the Europeans up to the first decade of the 21st century. With China hosting the Summer Olympics in 2008 and the Winter Olympics in 2022. And of course, South Africa and Qatar hosting the FIFA World Cup in 2010 and 2022, respectively. Okay. And of course, you also talk about inroads into sports governance, specifically with Emirati Mohammed bin Sulayem being elected in 2022. To lead the FIA as the first non-European leader. Then I talked about the remarkable involvement of Chinese brands in sponsoring global sports events and the ability of China to take advantage of cross-border capital flows and market openings occasioned by the rise of capitalism and aligning it strategically with its own domestic re-engineering. What the Chinese like to refer to as Chinese socialism. Socialism with the Chinese characteristics, or communism with Chinese characteristics, as you prefer. Okay, so then I mentioned how the successful and pervasive adoption of digital technology, has impacted greatly on sports performance, consumption, management, and of course business. I also showed how the pressure of climate change campaigns is helping shape the Saudis' urgent approach to the geopolitical economy of sports. Saudi Arabia has continued to invest heavily in sports, not just to win itself away from the dependency on oil revenues, but to also address the gender gap and have a healthier nation, a nation of citizens less prone to diabetes and hypertension, improving life expectancy. And what they are doing in motor racing in football, and remarkably boxing with His Excellency Turkey Al Sheikh, and his Riyadh season, and even going to the US, last for the first time last Saturday for the Terence Crawford and Israel Madrimov card, in boxing at 154 pounds. Right, that was a first, and that was also remarkable, I must assert. And then I talked about governments playing a critical role. I gave examples of Viktor Orban's Hungary, then China's stadium diplomacy in Africa, using it to achieve soft power and access to natural resources to power their own local industries, and of course activities of private equity investment, led by US-based investment outfits who are involved in different business collaborative models around the world. I exemplified the physical geography, the human geography, and the political geography in the context of the geopolitical economy of sports, and I asserted that the current state of the geopolitical economy of sports represents a situation where the global south is challenging the dominance of the global north, and as elite sports has stopped serving utilitarian objectives, the involvement of the global south in the sporting side of things, I think, will continue to rise. So today we are looking at the risks, the colorations or the tendencies the geopolitical economy of sports is exposed to. Okay, let's start by looking at how the race for the United States White House is shaping up, especially with the announcement of the Democratic pick for the vice presidential candidate by Vice President Kamala Harris. Okay, now it's important that we talk about this so that businesses can draw actionable insights and act proactively to safeguard and promote their interests. As the United States will be co-hosting the 2026 FIFA World Cup with Canada and Mexico, and will also host the next summer Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. All right, so global stock markets tumbled this week, with the Japanese index having its greatest loss in 37 years. As investors feared a possible U.S. recession. All right, and now Goldman Sachs, a world-leading investment bank, and has announced that the risk of the U.S. sliding into a recession has risen. Although some opportunistic hedge funds have been blamed for this loss of trillions of dollars in stock markets, but the U.S. Federal Reserve has to make an emergency reduction in interest rates to curtail the anxiety expressed by markets over a looming recession in the U.S. economy. All right, and you reckon that markets react proactively, and markets will always react to the forthcoming November 5 polls, and it will react in relation to the expected policies and programs and actions of the perceived winner in the polls. All right, so if the markets think that Kamala Harris is going to win, they react in anticipation in anticipating her policies, which might tend towards big government. All right, and needing to fund the ambitious government, maybe through most likely higher taxes, as the U.S. government crossed the $35 trillion debt mark last week. Okay, so the U.S. to finance that will be leaning towards higher taxes than more debt, predictably anyway. And you could argue that if the Republicans win in November, all right, Trump's energy policy, which he calls drill baby drill, and which he has actually proposed as being a solution to the inflation currently being experienced in the U.S. We think we drive down energy prices globally, okay, right? And this also results in reduced income for states and corporate entities who are dependent on oil and gas revenues. So markets are expected to react to these expectations, as most investors are rational and react based on perception of expected outcomes. So definitely, if there is a reduction in oil revenues, states that depend on oil revenues to finance their sporting endeavors, their sporting ambitions, will actually have their plans hampered, inhibited, as it were, and that there will be a variation in implementation, maybe as the scope, the scale, timelines, and all that, just to be able to factor in reality. So, like I said, markets are expected to react to, these expectations, and assuming that investors are rational, so they act based on perception, or they act or the outcomes that they expect. So I emphasize that a thorough understanding of all these intricacies and interconnections is important to help business executives consistently thread the needle, when the rubber meets the road. So for the US elections, we have a situation where Trump had the opportunity to pick an establishment running mate, so to speak, someone from the non-MAGA part, that's is Make America Great Again faction of the Republican Party. So someone from the non-MAGA part of the party, who are usually referred to as rhinos anyway, and who appeal to independent voters. Someone like Nikki Haley was a former South Carolina governor and served as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations under Trump, and he was Trump's extra rival for the Republican nomination this year, or Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, so a brilliant Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, although there are concerns over eligibility because of his state of residence being Florida, same state of residence as President Trump. Okay, but he opted for Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who's his protege and a close friend of his son, Donald Trump Jr. So, in my opinion, he decided to dip in rather than broaden or expand his base or support. And now, Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and I would liken this to what Trump has done in picking J.D. Vance, all right? Because President Biden, as a centrist, and an establishment Democrat, picked Kamala Harris, whose views are unarguably to the left of Joe Biden's views. So some observers were expecting Vice President Kamala Harris to balance the ticket by picking someone more establishment and central leaning, maybe like Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania's governor, or Senator Mark Kelly for Arizona, or even Andy Bashir, Governor Andy Bashir, or even an all-female ticket with Gretchen Whitmer, who's governor of Michigan. All right. And for observers who have been expecting the Josh Shapiro pick, being a charismatic central and establishment Democrats, of the battleground states of Pennsylvania, I know that elections in the U.S. are decided by hundreds of thousands of swing voters in battleground states. So the passing up on the picking Judge Shapiro is understandable due to pro-Palestinian sentiments and the Democratic Party as espoused by the squad in the U.S. Congress, as AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and others, and of course, Judge Shapiro clamped down on the protesters during the recent protests that were turning violent, and these voters already voted uncommitted during Joe Biden's primary, so understandably there is probable fear that they might decide to vote the couch on election day. So that might explain the reason why Kamala Harris did not pick Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. But Kamala Harris opted for someone whose views are progressive and far left, as his support for Medicare for all, and is signing a bill in April 2023 that made the state of Minnesota a sanctuary for children seeking gender-affirming health care, or child sex changes, literally, and transgender tourism to the state has vastly increased, right? So, and it has also been estimated that the U.S. Treasury will need to cough out about $4 trillion to provide Medicare for all, and funding this ambitious government intervention would likely impact taxes and debt. The U.S. crossing the $35 trillion threshold, and with this mirrored reality, or will it amount to burying one's head in the sand? We have to figure that out. So, rational governments, they want to be able to take care of all the needs of the citizens and the country. And if it were that straightforward, they could just print all the money they need to cater for all the needs of the citizens and the country and remain popular with their people and be able to hold on to power. But obviously, that will be unmitigated chaos, and people will not be able to keep up with the rate of how things will be spiraling out of control, and the socio-economic collapse might ultimately result in political instability. So I think that people can expect a more pandering to the left at the Summer Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. That's if, like we're having in Paris at the moment, if Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz win in November. So it's important for businesses to put that into consideration in strategic planning. Yes, and I also like to lean into the conversation involving two boxers, Algeria's Iman Khalif and Taiwan's Lin Yuting, who were cleared by the International Olympics Committee to compete in this year's Summer Olympics, despite being disqualified from the Women's World Championships by the International Boxing Association (IBA) after allegedly failing gender eligibility tests. So, the IOC based its decision to allow the boxers to participate in the women's boxing event at the Summer Olympics because it stripped the Russian-led IBA of its amateur boxing's governing body status in 2019 because of governance and regulation concerns. So it was alleged that the results of the tests they revealed a high level of testosterone for the two boxers, and they also possessed XY chromosomes, which one could conclude that yes, they are biological males. However, the IOC has questioned the procedure and said that the competitors were eligible for the women's division if their passports said they were female. All right. The two athletes were subjected to the tests after the organizing body received complaints from coaches and competitors, and after that test were forwarded to them in writing, they were given the opportunity to appeal to the Court of Arbitration of Sports, and the IBA offered to pay for majority of any cost that will allow both boxers to appeal, but only the Algerian appealed and later withdrew the appeal in 2023, and only for them to show up at this year's Summer Olympics in Paris. All right. So we also look at the risk imposed by digitization, the risk of devastating effects of cyber attacks. France's metro line was attacked, and the ground Vitesse TGV services were hampered on the day of the opening ceremony of the Summer Olympics. Alright, so look at the dangers and effects of criminal hacking too, and also espionage. They can be born out of the competitors' desire to outperform others and hence improve their own image, their value, their fan base, the market share, and of course revenues. And you see that ahead of their female World Cup semi-final against England. Yes, co-host Australia, they set up an aircraft to capture images of the Lionesses training behind closed doors. That's spying. And at this year's Summer Olympics in Paris, another example of spying. 2 assistant coaches of Canada used drones to spy on New Zealand's training before their opening game and the women's football event. Canada were docked 6 points as a result, and coach Bev Priestman and officials Joseph Lombardi and Jasmine Amanda were banned from any football-related activity for 1 year. And the Court of Arbitration of Sports has dismissed their appeal. All right, and there are even spywares that can be activated through WhatsApp messages, and they take over the microphone, and the camera of the invaded device. Right. So, in as much as digitization has greatly improved how sport is being performed, delivered, consumed, managed, and commercialized for vastly improved revenues, it's also important to understand the risks imposed by digitization in order to effectively and proactively ensure that investment and resourcefulness in mitigation and safeguards. Okay. So you have to effectively and proactively ensure investments and resourcefulness in mitigation and safeguards. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is another manifestation and that scenario of where the geopolitical economy of sports is exposed to risks. Okay, there was far-reaching consequences for sports stakeholders, across board, and we can argue that the Minsk agreement, which was meant to prevent this conflict, was just a mere kicking the can down the road moment to allow, in former German Chancellor Angela Merkel's words, to allow Ukraine arm itself. All right. So, and the IOC banned Russian athletes from participating in sporting events just days after the invasion, and FIFA and UEFA too, the European body for football, prevented Russian national teams and clubs from participating in their competitions. And you also had other international sports bodies, doing the same thing. And even UEFA, the European body controlling FIFA, football, organizing football, cancelled Gazprom's sponsorship agreement worth 40 million euros annually within 24 hours of the invasion, and also moved the Champions League final away from St. Petersburg. All right, and Manchester United Football Club too had to terminate its sponsorship deal with Aeroflot, a Russian airline, and famously Roman Abramovich, Chelsea Football Club's Russian owner, was forced to sell the club due to sanctions by the government of the United Kingdom. So, and FIFA too had to open a special transfer window for clubs in Russia and Ukraine, so that players can suspend their contracts and escape the violence and sign for other teams. This led to massive loss of revenues by clubs in both countries. With Shakhtar Donetsk, an elite club in Ukraine, seeking 50 million euros in damages from FIFA. Also, Russian TV channels and streaming services are not airing this year's Summer Olympics due to the IOC's ruling on the ban, on the Russian and Belarusian outlets, just allowing a number of athletes from the two countries to participate under a neutral flag. I think about 36 Russian athletes were approved, but 20 of them refused to partake due to what they see as humiliating conditions. Okay, and this is not the first time Russia will be boycotting the Olympics. I think actually the old Soviet Union also boycotted the Los Angeles Olympics in 1984, citing security concerns and chauvinistic sentiments and anti-Soviet hysteria being whipped up in the United States. All right, so look at all those things in perspective. But next episode will be delving more into the impact of the Russian, delving more into it, into the impact of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and also be juxtaposing what is playing out now with what we have. Okay, with what we had when the shoe was on the other leg, like the United States controversial invasion of Iraq, due to unfounded allegations of the latter's development of weapons of mass destruction, culminating in the demise of the country's leaders, Saddam Hussein, and of course regime change. So be sure to join me next week, which promises to be as informative and inspiring and eye-opening and insightful as always. So, and I always like to remind you that at Armagate, we are always ready to help and support your organizations to work optimally, creating frameworks and processes for optimization of resources and attainment of goals. You can contact us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram at Armagate, and you can call us on +234 810 999 666. You can also visit our website at www.thearmagate.org. Our email is contact@thearmagate.org. Alright, so I hope the time we spent together has been rewarding, and I look forward to hosting you again. Take care, thank you, and God bless.